Okay. Hello, everyone.
Hi there.
I'm Jacob, and this is Tomek. We work at DevSkiller. However, during those lives, we're not talking about the product. We are talking about IT and tech recruitment in general. So today we want to talk about how to advertise your technology stack to your candidates during recruitment, etc. So, Tomek, if you could just tell us just briefly about what the technology stack is, in fact, and why do we even want to share it with the candidates?
Right, so IT is quite special because in every single job you get a different set of tools that you're going to use at that job. And if you're into recruiting, even if you're not a technical person, you know exactly that there are front-end people and back-end people. Some people are using JavaScript, some people are using TypeScript, some are Java, some are C#. Some jobs are in cutting edge technologies that were just announced a couple of months ago, and some jobs require you to develop in COBOL or some really ancient version of .NET or Java or whatever. And this is actually one of the deciding factors when a candidate tries to apply to your job. So first of all, if you have a candidate that knows Java, he will not apply for a job that requires .NET knowledge or front-end knowledge or whatever. So that's quite basic. However, there are some quite big differences in between versions. There are some quite big differences in how you use a technology stack. And when you're writing a job advertisement and when you're talking to a candidate, it's really important, crucial to understand what kind of technologies are used by engineers currently at work, and also what is the level of flexibility for example, who decides what kind of technologies, languages, versions are developers using. If you are hiring a new person, is it possible to change the technology stack ever so slightly? Or maybe not, maybe everything's fixed and you have no choice, you just have to use whatever's given. So essentially, you as a recruiter, technical, non-technical doesn't matter, it's your responsibility to know what kind of tools, what kind of tool suite is going to be used at the job, because that's one of the most important aspects of job.
Okay, so basically that's something that we should include probably in the job posting, job advertisement. The question is if we should or we can use the technology stack to source candidates. So because you said that it's one of the most important factors when you are changing the job. So the question is if it's possible, for example, that people are joining the company or are even thinking about applying to the company because they like its technology stack or something like this. And I've seen many times when some company on their let's say doing some conference talks are saying, yeah, in our company we are using domain-driven design, or in our company we are using the Kubernetes, or we are using microservices, just to show to the people that, hey, we are very good company and we are a great company to work on. And by the way, we are hiring. So do you think that the technology stack is more about sourcing or more about hiring?
That's a really interesting question, because I actually saw a few companies that chose their technology stack because, well, it's easier to find candidates on the market, which is reasonable. I mean, when I'm choosing a technology, I'm also taking into account that, for example, React is more common than Vue. At least that's what it was yesterday. I don't know what it is today in the JavaScript market. So that's going to be one of the factors that's going to determine which technologies I'm going to choose. However, there are companies and there are even engineers who are choosing technology only because they are cool, and only because from the engineering part they want to try something, and from the recruiting part they want to drag people from the markets just to just as in our title,
basically the hype
advertise.
or hype-driven development.
Or CV-driven development. If
Yeah.
you're an engineer and you're choosing something really cool. So I can totally imagine a front-end developer who would love to work in TypeScript rather than JavaScript, and he or she is looking only for jobs in TypeScript, for example. But I can also imagine a candidate who is so experienced in some legacy technology like COBOL, I don't know, or small talk, whatever, that the candidate precisely looks for these types of applications because he or she knows that this is the job position that pays really, really well. COBOL programmers, which is an awful programming language and used only in some really ancient systems, it's really well paid. So don't be afraid of showing that your stack is your technology stack is legacy and really old. You will scare off most of the people. However, you will find the best talents who are actually anxious to try it because they are experienced in it.
Yeah, it's the same. It works in the same way in business. Like some companies are afraid that, okay, but if we'll like raise prices or we'll remove some feature, then not all companies all over the world will be our customers. Of course not. The question is if you want to hire all of the candidates from the market, or you are just looking to fill the skill gaps or gaps inside your organization, and that you are looking for the candidates that are the best fit for your organization. So don't be like afraid of scaring out the candidates, because these people, even if you will be able to successfully hire them, will probably change the job in 3 months or maybe 6 months. And it's like a shoot in your feet when you're hiring candidates, onboarding people. Like hiring a bad hire costs like a lot of money. Like to do some researches we are doing, it's around $90,000 to hire a wrong hire in IT. So you don't want to hire wrong candidates. So like being honest with your stack is pretty important. So just to sum up what you said, like choosing technology stack or advertising technology stack, let's say indirectly by conference talks, when I can do a talk about how I use Kubernetes at DevSkiller, of course, like the side effect of such presentation is to like ensure that everyone on the market and everyone at this conference knows that at DevSkiller we are using Kubernetes and we are doing microservices, etc., and we have big scale, etc. That's pretty important. Okay, assuming that that's something that is more related to sourcing, how do you think we should present the technology stack? How deep should we go with the technology stack? Should I just tell that, okay, so we are using Java-related technologies, or should I tell that we use Java in this particular version? Maybe how often do we update, or etc. So how important is to be precise about the company technology stack?
I'll get back to your question in a second. I'll just go back to what you said about a talk at a conference regarding your stack that you're using at a company. This touches upon employer branding, and more precisely an employer branding from the engineering perspective. So you want to have a brand among engineers of a company that uses like certain technologies. I can name quite a few companies where I know exactly what kind of technology stack are they using, simply because they advertise it so often in broad technical presentations. So that's a whole different topic of employer branding, which we might touch upon one day. But coming back to your question, how deep should you go regarding the technology stack? So this requires a little bit of understanding of the stack. For example, if you say that you are doing front-end in Angular, this tells pretty much nothing, because Angular is like 10 years old right now, or the framework was, the history of the framework is like 10 years old, and you are either using Angular 1, which is totally different compared to Angular 2. And most of the candidates actually know Angular 1 or Angular 2, and they know exactly in which kind of framework they want to work with. However, the difference between Angular 2 and 3, 3 and 4, 6 and 7, or whatever the version is right now, is not so significant. So if you say that we are working in Angular 2 plus, so something, so Angular 2 or something above it, then everyone is happy. If you don't mention it at all, then some people will assume that it's Angular 1. So this is just an example of how deeply you should go, and that you should actually understand the topic. The same applies to, for example, Java. If you say that you're working in Java 8, then people can expect that it's like moderately new, fresh, and it has features that everyone likes. If it's anything above Java 8, okay, I'm fine with Java 8, maybe 11, whatever. If, however, you only say we're working in Java, then you can expect anything. It's a language that's 25 years old, right? So you have to put some bottom line here. What else? It's important to be a little bit more specific. So is it Java with Spring or is it Java EE, which are two totally different stacks? And even if you're a Java developer, you might be completely junior in one of them and very, very advanced in the other. So if you're non-technical, ask your developers, ask your engineering teams, what is the difference between, I don't know, Kubernetes and Mesos? Or is there a big difference between Kubernetes 1.1 and 1.2? Maybe there is, maybe there is not, because that's something the candidates will ask for in the first place. And sometimes the details aren't so important, and you're just going to sound funny if you're saying that we're working with Spring Boot 2.3 rather than 2.2. No one cares. It's just unimportant.
Yeah, even in the like how to screen articles that we share on our blog, we are saying, like, for example, like the Maven 3 is very close to Maven 2, but it's something totally different than Maven 1. So that's the important information to share. With Spring, I agree partially, because like with Spring Boot 1 and 2, there is no huge difference. But for example, in Spring Framework, letting the candidate know either you use Spring 3 or Spring 5, it makes a difference. So I would say that if you use quite modern version of the framework, then probably you can share it, but without sharing it, it's not a big issue. Because if you will share that we are using modern version of Java, so Java 11, and then you will share the information that you are using Spring 8, then probably most of the people will assume that you are using the latest version of the Spring framework. However, if you will write that we are using Java 6, then probably if you are using modern version of framework, however, they don't work, I think, even on the recent versions of Java, then it's good to mention that. So I agree that you should always check with your engineering team if it makes or doesn't make sense to add a specific version to this one, and rather you need to think about what would be the default, let's say, understanding of the version. Because if you're a modern company doing microservices, then without mentioning versions of Java, probably everyone will assume that you are using pretty recent version. However, if you're a big bank and you won't mention the version, then probably people will say, okay, they are not mentioning the version because it's so old. So please think about what's the, let's say, to be honest, what's the employer branding of your company? And do candidates see your company as a company living on a technological edge, or company living in a technological basement using very old technologies? Because that will affect their understanding of the versions of the technology that you are using. And as Tomek mentioned, like, those versions are pretty important. Okay, so assuming that I already know what I want to share, I did all of the presentations, so everyone in Europe or in US is aware of Desker using microservices in Kubernetes. How can we share the technology stack? Should we list it, all of the 50 technologies that we use in a job posting, or maybe there are some better tools that you can use to do that?
Okay. Before I forget, once again, I'll go back to what you said. So the fact that your company is living on the edge is not necessarily so advantageous, at least for some candidates, because if you are like a senior developer and you just heard that a company uses, I don't know, Rust or Knative or some other technology that was released a month ago, this would actually be a kind of a yellow flag for me, because maybe they aren't as mature as one would expect, because they are jumping into whatever is new on the market. It's a yellow flag, it's not a red one, but at least I would be a little bit curious, and I would ask the recruiter, or maybe the engineer that talks to me, why are you actually using so cutting edge technologies? Aren't you afraid, and so on?
I fully agree. I'm not saying that it's a good or bad to be treated as living on technological edge. I'm just saying that the employer branding of your company affects the default versions. If we'll ask what's the, let's say, Java version used in, I don't know, Netflix or Twitter, then probably most of the people will assume that it's pretty modern.
Yeah.
And if we'll ask about, I don't know, some bank, then probably people will assume, no, they are using COBOL and probably Java 4 or something like this. So it's pretty ancient. So just like be aware of how your company is seen or understood by the candidate, because that will affect the reading of the versions that you are using.
All right, so now going back to your question, how should you share a technology stack? So the simplest thing to do is just to put it in your job listing so that everything is nicely enclosed there. There are some other options if you want to be a little bit more hip. So there's this website called, I believe, stackshare.io or something, where you can just like put all the technologies you use at your company.
I think we even use it.
Yeah, that's why I remember the name. So you can actually Google like DevSkiller's Stackshare, DevSkiller at Stackshare.io, and then, or maybe you'll put a link under the YouTube video. And there you can like see what kind of technologies are we using. I'm not even sure they are like disclosing the versions, but at least like all the things we use. Another way, which I think is the best, and we already talked about it quite a lot, just be open about it in kind of a different channels. So conferences, blog posts, a technical blog that you have, that your company has, is actually a great place to share your technology stack kind of implicitly. For example, you're describing how you migrated a Ruby version, or that you are no longer using, I don't know, Python 2, we completely migrated to Python 3. This already tells every reader kind of implicitly that, okay, so they're using Ruby, they're using Python, they're using whatever stack is. So a technology blog where you describe whatever you do at your company is always a good thing, or it's typically a good thing to have. It also touches upon the idea of employer branding, which we might cover one day. But just to be clear here, that's one of the ways to share your technology stack. And I believe you shared a link to our platform. Great.
Yeah, I tried to do that. It was the first time when I was doing it from StreamYard, so it was shared automatically on Facebook. Then I manually like shared it on YouTube, but it's there. Okay, so do you think that there is anything else important to cover around the sharing of the technology stack? Do you think that, for example, it's important to like because you mentioned the legacy stack, and like that we should be honest that we are using some like pretty old versions of some technologies. Do you think that it can also like or sharing some particular versions of the technologies that can also like let's say assume or allow the candidate to assume that it's, for example, more maintenance job or more greenfield? Because what I would probably expect is when I see a company sharing with me the information that they're using pretty old technologies, then it's pretty, let's say, uncommon that the companies are starting new projects in old technologies. So I would probably assume that if the company is using old version of Java, it will be more maintenance job than developing new features. And on the second hand, if I will see that the company is using pretty new software stack, then I can use like not only the technology is not legacy, but also the software is not legacy. So it's not a maintenance job. What do you think about that? Do you think that it's pretty common that candidates are like, let's say, interconnecting such things are the employer branding, the technology stack, and the type of the job or the role they will be working on?
Well, so this reminds me, for example, of the Struts web framework, which is really ancient right now. And when I see a job posting with Struts, I know 100% that no one like sane would start a new project with Struts. I saw many projects which actually were like quite up to date. So even though the project was like several years old, the developers made sure that all the dependencies are constantly being upgraded, which is not really actually bad, because there's nothing wrong with having an old big project. as long as someone takes care of it. This is maintenance, but it's not as bad as you would assume with something that's like stuck with technologies like that are 5-10 years old, because that means you're like completely, it's just a big ball of mud, and there's no sane exit from this one. So I wouldn't make such a bold assumption that old technologies mean maintenance and new technologies mean greenfield, because, as I said, sometimes old projects are constantly being upgraded, but it's still maintenance. I rarely see new projects starting in old technologies, but that's really a red flag, because it means that the team doesn't learn anything. They just know this particular version of Ruby, this particular version of, I don't know, Go, whatever, and they start every new project in that version with this framework, with this technology stack, because that's the only thing they ever learned. And that's kind of a red flag for me. So there is a correlation. I wouldn't be so strong with the statement that it's always the same, but there's some correlation here. One thing I would mention is that many times I see job advertisements that are more like wish lists. So they are not describing the current state of affairs, like, okay, we are using the old Java, we are using old Python, we are using like deployment via FTP, whatever, but we would love to have a new version of Ruby or production or whatever. And we actually started this one tiny toy project that doesn't really handle any traffic, but it's there. So that's what we're gonna explain, and that's what we're gonna put in our job advertisements, because yeah, that's where we're heading. But that's not true.
And you can expect the candidate to share with you the CV of the things that the candidate would like to know, and that's then you're on the same page.
Yeah, that's funny. Yeah, so be honest, and indeed, if you're making a big technology shift, big technology transformation, and you're looking for people who are going to lead this transformation from, I don't know, old language to new language, old framework to new framework, that's okay. I mean, many companies are struggling with that. Just be honest with it. We have a big monolith on the left. We have microservices, serverless, whatever is popular these days on the right. Most of the code is still in the monolith. We are hiring you so that you take out things from the monolith and migrate it to the new technology. But it means you're still going to be working with the old technology. Don't expect it to be a greenfield project. And that's okay, because I know many developers who actually enjoy working with legacy, and they enjoy working with existing mature code base. So don't be afraid of it, if you want to find the best candidate rather than a candidate who is the most excited about something that's not really true in your place.
Okay, so I think that it's that about that. So like just to sum it up, for sure, remember to be honest in the technology stack, because yes, you will like probably trigger some people not to apply to your company, but it's better to not apply or not have the candidate apply than to lose the candidate at the very end of the recruitment process, or even worse, after you hire a candidate, like 3 months later, the candidate will tell you, no, it's not something that I expected. And that's one thing. And be precise in sharing the information, because like asking candidate or forcing candidate to ask the questions about particular things during the recruitment process is not helping you, and it's not helping the candidates. Do you want to add, Tomek, something at the to sum up?
One more thread, I would say, to the discussion: in-house tools. So everything that you've built for your own, which is not off-the-shelf product, but you built your own framework, you built your own language, God forbid. Either you have geniuses in your engineering department. Google is like that. They have a lot of in-house tools built in-house. Or you're having something which is much worse than legacy. So also be honest about it. Just at least mention that you have your own framework or your own object relational mapping library or whatever, because this either means you have really brilliant people on board, or you're going to have some really hot mess to deal with. So that's my last 2 cents regarding technology stack. And regarding sharing it with a candidate, you either put it on the job advertisement, find a platform or a document, or publish it somewhere like StackShare, or just publish it on your own website, or be public about it on conferences or whatever. So there are quite a few ways to deal with it. Actually, just listing technologies on a job advertisement is probably the worst, but it's still better than not doing it or not being honest.
Maybe we should do like another live about how to write a good job posting. So like if you have any like ideas or anything that you would like us to talk about, just please share them in the comments. And that's all from our side today. So thank you very much and have a nice day.
Thanks. Bye.
I'm not sure if it ended. Let me refresh it.